So last July, Rassie Erasmus named a starting 15 for the Springboks with 990 international caps. Now, with his most recent squad that has been announced for this year, there are 9 uncapped players, and it gave me the idea, what would the current Springboks lineup look like with under 100 caps? Now, the reason I say that is through doing the live streams of the matches, we see a lot of chat. And one thing that's been said is that once they lose some of those guys who were a part of the last 2 World Cups, South Africa are going to struggle. But I don't think that's the case when you look through at some of the young talent that is coming up through the ranks. So that's what we're going to be doing in this video. I've got a 23-man side. I had an allowance of 100 caps, which is pretty tricky when you consider some of the names announced in the squad. Let's see what kind of Springboks team we can put out on the field. So starting with the front row. Now, there are certain players, of course, that you would think would get the nod at international level, but they've got too many caps for this video. So in the number 1 jersey, I've gone for Untuthuko Machunu, number 2, Manus van der Merwe, and number 3, Wilco Louw. Now, of course, normally you'd see Oxnard Share, you'd see Bongi Umbanambi, but between those two, that's pretty much the whole 100 cap allowance gone. So I've gone with Untuthuko Machunu. He's got 3 caps, plays very well for the Sharks. And I do think with a little bit more international experience, as well as a few more seasons of the URC, could really have a chance of becoming a starter for the Springboks side. Manus van der Merwe, he is uncapped, one of the many that Rassie brought in for this training squad. And he plays pretty well for the Scarlets. Now, like I said, Umbanambi and Malcolm Marx are the 2 that you would normally see. But due to this lineup consisting of less than 100, it meant that going with an uncapped guy in the starting lineup didn't seem like a bad idea. Wilco Louw, he is really a great bang for the buck. That sounds a bit weird. He is really good value for money, once again. In terms of the amount of caps that he's got, he's a very good man to have in the side, is pretty much what I was trying to say. Only 16 international caps. He's on his way to becoming one of the best tight head props in the world. The way that he scrummages for the Bulls throughout the URC, he's big, he's strong, and he's really going to be a danger at international level throughout 2025. But that is my starting front row. Moving on now to the locks, of course, Eben Etzebeth. Normally you would see him in the locking duo, but he's got 131 caps. So even by himself, he can't make this lineup. But instead at number 4, I've got Jean Klein. I feel like that's a decent option. 7 international caps, so brings that tally up that little bit further. And then number 5, Ruan Nokia. Now, he only has the 6 caps. He was one of those guys that got the opportunity when there were many injuries for the Springboks throughout last year. He heavily stepped up in that locking duo. And he's also pretty versatile because he can play in that number 7 jersey if needed for the Boks as well. But looking through now at the loose forward trio, this is where I think it was the most challenging for myself, because Cameron Honeycomb, he was initially in the named squad, which I am basing this video off, but at the time of recording this, he is no longer in that team, and instead Evan Roos has come in as his replacement. So for that reason, Honeycomb, as handy as it would have been to have a guy with 1 cap as an option in this team, I now have Roos, who does have the 7, but he does not feature in my loose forward trio. Number 6, Renzo Duplessis, the Lions representative. He's been a fantastic option for them, runs the ball hard and loves getting into those breakdowns. Number 7, Vincent Tchuka, of course, recently qualifying to play for South Africa. He's a great player for the Sharks. It is a tricky one because in that Sharks loose forward trio, you've got Sia Khaleesi and you've got Pepsi Buthelezi. So sometimes it can be quite difficult to get the limelight on yourself. But Vincent Tchuka, you know, ever since he transferred from the Lions, where he looked like he was going to be a real superstar, he's found some nice momentum at the Sharks, and I do think that he'd do pretty well in an international kit as well. And then at number 8, I've got João Augustus. Now, this is a guy that's been talked about quite a bit in terms of a player who is overseas. He does play for the Northampton Saints. He's got the size, he's got the speed. He could really be a bit of a bolter when it comes to this season for the Boks if given those opportunities. And perhaps with Honeycomb out, we know that Evan Roos doesn't feature hugely high on Rassie's list at the moment, so perhaps Augustus could get some time in the Springboks starting XV. But in terms of my cap allowance, at this point in time, I've made my whole forward pack from just the 32 international caps. Half of those is Wilco Low, but I feel like you can tolerate that with the way that that man plays. So that means I've got 68 to use in terms of my backline as well as the reserves. So I have still got another 15 players that I have to try and keep under that allowance. But moving on to the backline, number 9, I've gone with Grant Williams. I feel like that is a great choice for the starting side. Now, the other guy who hasn't got a huge amount of caps in the Springboks squad is Morne Vandenberg, but I do think that I'm going to go Vandenberg off the bench. So Grant Williams, he has got 17 caps. He's actually the most capped in terms of my whole starting lineup or reserves, I believe. So he has to really do well in the Springboks side. I do think that outside of his injury, he would have been starting a lot of games for the Sharks, or at least as an impact player off the bench. Jaden Hendrickse, for a lot of people, is a little bit 50-50. So I do think Grant Williams would bring that bit more consistency to my Springboks starting side. At number 10, I've got Sasha Feinberg Ngome Zulu. Only the 8 caps for him at international level. Of course, lit the world on fire with what he was able to do throughout 2024. Even though he did have a few injuries throughout the season, I do still think the combination of him and Williams would be absolutely incredible at international level. So maybe this year is when we do get to see those two pairing up. In terms of the centres we will move on to now, I've actually made a bit of a reshuffle compared to where this man has been playing throughout the URC, and that is Ethan Hooker as my number 12. Now, he's been a sensational player for the Sharks throughout 2025. He's been able to create chances down the wing. He actually has played quite a bit of centre. That was mainly during the time when Andre Esterhuizen was unavailable. But I do think that Ethan Hooker could really add quite a bit to that number 12 jersey. And also Andre Esterhuizen, he's got too many caps, so I wasn't able to squeeze him into the side as well. Number 13, this one's going to split opinions, but I've gone Kanan Moody. Now, based off this current URC season, you'd say that Moody would be struggling to get anywhere near that Springbok starting lineup, but he has only got the 12 caps. He has played a little bit of 13 before, and him and Andre Esterhuizen perhaps could have been quite a cool combo to see for that 12 and 13. But Ethan Hooker and Kanan Moody, two very different type of players, and maybe that would work quite nicely in that midfield combo. Now, someone who I would absolutely love to have in that number 13 jersey who didn't make it into Rassie's squad, Lorenzo Julius. I think that him and Ethan Hooker as that midfield combo could be the future. So maybe down the line, we do get to see that. Who knows how long it could be before Julius gets that international start at 13. They've still got Lucanio Arm. They've still got Jesse Creel, and I do think that Moody was probably selected as a winger in this case, so it is going to be a wee while, but once he gets that chance, I do think that Julius could be very handy in the back three. Number 11, I've gone with an uncapped player, Ntokozo Makaza. Now, he has got no international experience, but he also doesn't have any URC experience. The man has come from the Varsity Cup, and he's a sensational talent. And I do think he's got a very bright future. I'm curious to see how Rassie will use him, because of course this is a massive training squad that they've got, but I do think they'll compress it a little bit as they get into the July internationals, which could mean that for now he's just getting to train with the squad and then eventually could make his way into the team. Out on the other wing, I've gone with Edwald van der Merwe, just the one international cap, so seemed like a pretty safe choice for number 14. Now that is a lot of speed down the two wings, which is great news for this future Springboks squad. And then number 15, I have gone Apalele Fasi. He has been a little bit hit and miss throughout the Shark season of the URC, but he's only got 11 international caps. Plus last year, he really did step up in that number 15 jersey. So I feel like for that reason, he's the perfect man to have at 15. Plus, Willie LaRue, you know, he's almost got 100 by himself. So there was no way for me to put him in as that number 15. But that is now the starting lineup done and dusted. We move on to the reserves bench. Now, I don't have a huge amount of caps left for me to be able to use, which does mean in this front row, I believe I've got one man, unfortunately, out of position, but I don't believe there was a way that I could do it otherwise. Number 16, This is where I've gone with Jan-Hendrik Wessels. Now, some people may think that he is just a prop, but he is actually pretty versatile. He has played hooker before, and if I wasn't using him as a hooker, this video wouldn't be possible because Malcolm Marx, of course, has far too many caps. Same with Umbanambi. Now, if they had either Johan Robela or Andre Hugo Fenta in the squad, this would be a lot more doable. But Jan-Hendrik Wessels, he's my replacement hooker, 3 caps to his name, and certainly many more in the future. Him and Wilco Lowe are such a dangerous combo, and I hope that we get to see it throughout 2025 in the 17 jersey. This is where I've gone with Nedeling Fouché. Now, I know that he mainly plays tight head, but the Stormers did have that period where they had a lot of injuries at prop, whether that was Steven Kitsoff, Brock Harris, the list really did go on, and I want to say there was a slight moment where Nedeling Fouché did actually play on the loose head side, so that's my technicality of why I've been able to put him as my number 17. Would have liked to have Gerhard Stennekamp, but he had too many caps with about 11, which would have put me over the budget. In the number 18 jersey, I've got Azanathi Nalabakanye, the big man for the Lions, and boy does he pack a punch when he's in form. I would love to see what he can do at international level, and with the absence of Frans Malharba due to injury, it really does open up the door for these new tight heads that we haven't really seen before, like Wilco Lowe with his 16 caps. For me, the way that he plays, he's probably going to be a starter for the South Africans throughout 2025, with Vincent Koch making his way off the bench or vice versa. But someone like a Nalabakanye who really can push hard in those scrums. He also likes to make huge tackles, which could be very handy for forcing errors from the opposition. So I'll put the big man as my number 18. Moving on now to the other forwards. In the number 19 jersey, I've gone with another guy who hasn't got any international caps, and that is Cobus Wiese. Now, he's really burst onto the scene throughout this year. He is a guy who's been strong for a while, but this season in particular seems to have really taken him to the next level. Of course, the brother of Jasper Wiese, who I couldn't put in the side because too many caps, but Cobus Wiese I do think would be a very handy option as a replacement lock. Now, the other option could have been Jean Klein off the bench and Cobus Wiese and Ruan Nokia in my starting side, just to match up with what we'd see for the Bulls. But I do think he's a smart option to have in the Springboks side. Number 20, this is where I have got Evan Roos. He's got his 7 caps. Now, originally I probably would have had Cameron Honeycomb either in the starting lineup or off the bench, and that would have allowed me an extra 6 caps to be able to use elsewhere. But in this case, Evan Roos, he is a versatile player, can play 6 or 8, and also does bring a lot of physicality to those breakdowns, as well as just the general play. So it made sense to have him somewhere in this 23. Now we move on to the replacement backs. Now, I would have liked to go with a 6-2 split, but my cap allowance wouldn't really allow it. So we have gone Morne Vandenberg, number 21, Jordan Hendrickse, number 22, and number 23, Kjuan Horn. Now, between the 3 of those men, they've got the 5 caps. 2 guys from the Lions. In fact, you could argue 3 men from the Lions had it not been for Jordan Hendrickse's transfer for this season. He does now play for the Sharks. Gets quite a few starting minutes in their number 10 jersey, but for this box side, I've instead had him coming off the bench. Morne Vandenberg, with just the 2 caps at international level, he has got a lot of potential, runs a brilliant support line, could lead to a lot of tries or at least the assists. And then Kjuan Horn, depending on what you prefer, you might even look at him as a starting 15 with Apalele Fasi making his way off the bench. But that is my Springboks 23. Now, I've done the maths, which hopefully is correct, but I believe it comes to the grand total of 96 caps for the Springboks side. That is less than 10% of what we saw in the starting 15 up against Ireland in 2024. So I guess that begs the question, are the Springboks really in trouble once they lose a few of those World Cup players, the likes of an Etzebeth, the likes of Khaleesi, the likes of Willie LaRue, or have they got the next generation of talent coming through the rankings? And I mean, when you look through at this 23, of course, there are certain guys that would get switched out that will slowly earn their way into the Springboks team, but I do think it still looks like a pretty handy side, and I believe would be strong enough to challenge a lot of international sides all across the globe. But nonetheless, if you did enjoy this slightly different concept, of course, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. Do let me know who you guys would go with in your Springboks team if you had only 100 cap allowance. But if you guys did enjoy this type of video, perhaps in the next one we could give ourselves a few more caps to be able to work with. Of course, Eben Etzebeth becoming the most capped Springbok of all time. He has got 131 caps to his name. So with an extra 31 on top of that 100, I think we could do some damage in terms of the players that I can bring in. So if you want to see that video, of course, be sure to let me know in the comments. But thank you all very much for tuning in. If you did enjoy, be sure to leave a like and subscribe. And I will see you all for the next one.